Okay, we will go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our February general meeting. We will start with our land acknowledgement. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akimel O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. So our agenda tonight, we'll have our few updates. If any SBC representatives want to make an announcement, there's time for that. We'll have our question and answer with Dr. Menzel. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions in advance. Those can always be submitted. I take them until about 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting, and it's the same link every month, and that's open all the time. And then we have a presentation from Matt Linz from SUSD. He's the Safe and Supportive School Specialist, and he is going to be talking about our Pbis programs within SUSD. So for our updates, our next general meeting is March 17th, and it is going to be SUSD Governing Board 101. So we'll have 2 board members with us to explain the purpose of the board, the role of the board, the different types of meetings, the ways to engage with the board, and give parents just a great overview of how we can be involved in interacting with them. And then an announcement on behalf of Shannon Cronn. SUSD has a event coming up next week, next Tuesday, called Healthy Relationships 101. So the registration link is there, and I expect this information is on their website as well, and she may speak about it a little bit later also. So SPC Rep Announcements. Is there any reps here that want to announce anything about their school? I see Bran waving. You're still muted.
I'm so sorry. It was probably best that I was muted because I didn't say anything important. This is not about Cocoa Paw, but I just wanted to let everybody know that I am going with assistance from a few other people, going to be assisting Coronado High School with a fundraiser for their PTO. And I just wanted to solicit some assistance with that, whether you can donate or if you can share the fundraiser, that would be incredibly helpful. They're in the process of setting up an online donation through their website, but in the interim, we can also make donations through their Facebook page. So if it's all right with you, Emmy, I'd be happy to provide a link to that, that Facebook post that they have where you can donate online, provided it's okay with SPC.
Yeah, yes, please. I think the chat's open, so you should be able to put it in there.
All right, I'll need a few minutes. I've got to get to my computer to do that, but that's just wanted to encourage everybody to either donate if you can, or please share it within your network.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bren.
No problem.
Any other schools? Okay, then we will move right on ahead to Dr. Menzel.
Good evening.
There we go. Welcome. Thank you again for joining us. Okay, so we have a fairly long list here, and some of them are quite long. So we will start off with, would you consider expanding the community volunteer program in SUSD to include supplemental and/or remedial tutoring services? This could be provided in class, after school, and during the summer, or could be performed via remote distance online methods as appropriate.
So I would say that it's a qualified yes. We would consider expanding it. The current recommendations in terms of having people on campus are still pretty restrictive. Maricopa County Department of Public Health, along with CDC, caution against bringing additional people on campus at this juncture. But over time, as we think about strategies to accelerate learning and support the needs of our students, I think something like building the community volunteer program is important. And so I would say as we get into the fourth quarter, hopefully the COVID cases continue to go down. And as we move into the summer, we can probably ramp up some of these other supports. So definitely open to that possibility.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I've read the CDC's new directives regarding safe operations of schools. Without getting deep into the details, I would like to hear how well SUSD will be able to execute on the disciplines discussed. My biggest interests are separation, classrooms, halls, and cafeterias, exhausting internal air, and the potential for expanding the school day by weeks or and year to provide smaller classes, increase teacher time, and the opportunity to remediate the education gap we've created over the last year. So if we had the money, how would we execute this? And how much money do you believe we would need to execute this?
So if you look at the CDC guidelines, there are 5 primary strategies, all of which we are employing in Scottsdale Unified School District at some level. The question becomes strict adherence to the physical distancing guidelines in particular. So masking, our kids are more than 90% compliant with the mask requirement. It's actually pretty impressive. When it comes to physical distancing, last fall, as well as the second semester, we never were able to get the 6 feet or more as a guaranteed physical distancing on our campuses. We've been able to open and stay open with 3 feet as our target of physical distancing. So when it comes to the importance of physical distancing, in principle and practice, we don't get to the standard that the CDC had, but it appears as though the standard that we've implemented is working in our schools. The hand washing, the cleaning of surfaces that are frequently touched, and the contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine are all things that we've been implementing since we returned in-person learning. The question then becomes related to cost and getting to that 6 feet of separation. I don't know of a scenario where we could offer in any of our facilities an ability to provide a regular school experience with 6 feet of distancing with the staff that we have. So that the question contemplated, extended hours, for example. Where am I going to get the teachers to provide extended hours of education? Our teachers have done incredible work during the course of this school year. And to think that we might somehow be able to extend the amount of time that they work, whether it's longer hours during the day or over the summer, there isn't a supply of teachers that are ready to come in and backfill for second shift. We already have a teacher shortage. So some of that's just not even plausible. In terms of the ventilation question, we have upgraded the air filters that are in our systems. We've been piloting the bipolar ionization project and working to get more data on that, as well as look at other options there. And we've also taken steps to look at some of the surveillance recommendations in terms of testing being available for staff and students on campus. So from my perspective, we can get close to substantial compliance with CDC, but not strict adherence to everything that's in that recommendation. As I understand it from Maricopa County Department of Public Health, their position is that if we've been open and our mitigation strategies are working and we're carefully monitoring the cases in each building, then we can continue doing what we're doing. Then if we see a rise in COVID cases that creates concern, then they would push us to more rigid enforcement of those physical distancing guidelines in particular. But it's the layered mitigation strategies, and there are 5 that are listed there, and we're working to comply in some respect with all 5 of those.
Okay, great. Thank you. So these two go together. what was talked about and or decided on the full return to school after spring break? And do we have results on Mountainside Middle School full day schedule? I know some families are excited to have their high schoolers in full day too. What do you think will happen?
So no decisions were made at the governing board meeting last night. What we did was discuss the information that the governing board would like to have in order to make a decision about the fourth quarter. So there are a couple of things that I think are relevant. One, the Mountainside Middle School pilot project doesn't even start until next Monday. So we have 2 weeks of Mountainside Middle School experience prior, or almost 2 weeks. It'd be 2 weeks before spring break, but we'll have a little bit more than a week's worth of information when the board meets on March 2nd to make a determination. Among the things that the board indicated last night that they're concerned about, that they would like more information on, one is surveillance testing, whether it's pooled testing or some kind of regular, frequent opportunity for staff and students to be tested so we can identify asymptomatic carriers potentially early in the process. Secondly, there's concern about the ability to cohort and create physical distancing during lunch. That's been our ongoing concern at the middle school and high school is, can we ensure 6 feet of physical distance? And many of you have been on our middle school and high school campuses. Some have greater abilities to do that than others. Many have talked about utilization of outdoor spaces for that purpose. And I've been reminded, but I have not lived through the months of April and May. To me, they sound wonderful. In Michigan, we'd be lucky to go outside. Here, I'm told people are driven inside because it's too sunny and too hot. But there are opportunities to think about utilization of indoor and outdoor spaces to create separation. There were concerns expressed by more than one governing board member about spring break and coming back immediately after spring break with the elevated potential risk that with what we saw after fall break was an elevation in cases, particularly at one high school, that if we had had our building specific metrics in place at that time, one of our high schools would have been closed for 2 weeks. So we'll want to talk about, does it make sense to spend the first week all online before coming back in person, just to mitigate that risk so that we don't end up in a place where a couple of buildings are virtual for 2 or more weeks. The other factors that are under consideration are the ability to cohort, contact trace, and we're taking into consideration what's the perceived benefit from returning to a full schedule versus the disruptive aspect of returning to a full schedule. So at Student Advisory Board presentation last night, there were comments made by the students, and they'd collected information from their peers about how during the course of this pandemic, they've now finally established certain routines. They know what to expect. The modified block schedule is something that they've adjusted to. And if we move to a traditional full 6-period day beginning in the fourth quarter, it disrupts all of that. And the question is, to what end? So there is an argument for returning to a traditional schedule. One of the former barriers to moving in that direction was the health and safety of our staff. And as you know, most of those who wanted to be vaccinated had that opportunity. Most of those vaccines, first and second dose, were completed last weekend, so that we're at a place where for our staff, we've got the benefit of the vaccine for most of them. But it doesn't ensure that you don't have spread with students who are on campus. Students can take it home. You've got other concerns that still exist. So it's all of those variables that the governing board wants to really talk through when considering what makes the most sense for the fourth quarter. How do we, as Scottsdale Unified School District, meet the needs of our students, finish this school year as strong as we can? And quite frankly, I can't predict what the governing board will do or where the data will lead us. I just know that we're going to collect all that information. We plan to issue a survey to middle school and high school parents. I was on the student advisory board meeting earlier today. I know where the students have been landing in terms of their perspective at the high school level. I also was at a site council meeting for Desert Mountain High School this afternoon, and I heard a little bit of a different story from some of the parents there. So I think what's really important for us is to gather the information from all of our stakeholders, weigh the pros and the cons of all the options in front of us, fully work out what the mitigation strategies would be at the middle schools and high school levels, interrogate the extent to which something less than a full day may be doing a disservice to some of our students. I mentioned at the governing board meeting my concern about the elevated failure rate of sixth grade students, for example, 2 to 3 times higher than what we normally see. So that's a concern. Social emotional health, mental health issues are a concern for us. And the other thing that we're doing more investigation on is the fact that many of our neighboring schools that have been open for full day of teaching and learning with lunch. And so we're working to see what, if any, mitigation strategies they've put in place. I talked to one of my colleagues earlier today, and the answer is outside of the line where you stand to get lunch, they don't have 6 feet of separation. What the superintendent said is she's visited every single one of the high schools, and students congregate with their same peer group, the group that they're congregating with when they're out of school as well. And there's some misperception about how lunch actually works in terms of how much time the kids are actually together, because it moves pretty quickly when you're cycling students through. So we're going to gather as much information as we can so that the governing board can make an informed decision that will result in ending this school year as strong as we possibly can.
Okay, great. Sounds like you had a busy day. That was lots of people. Okay, so non-COVID questions. We have, what is your vision for the role of the arts in our schools post-pandemic? Are you planning to grow accessibility in the arts and encourage greater participation in the arts as a part of recovery and re-engagement?
As a father of 2 theater girls and my youngest who has a Bachelor of Fine Arts, I'm a big supporter and believer in the importance of that creative outlet and its critical role in what we do. Oftentimes schools will move from STEM to STEAM to really emphasize the importance of that creativity, whether it's through performing arts, visual arts. There are a lot of different avenues for young people to express themselves. And it's been really difficult during the pandemic. My daughter, for example, when she's accustomed to performing live, now is doing things online and looking at different options. It's not the same. I miss going to live performances. And so we're going to do everything as a district to continue to support and promote the arts at all levels. My understanding is that we've got fantastic programs. I've watched some extraordinarily creative performances this year online by students at Chaparral, Arcadia, and Desert Mountain High Schools. I think that when we come out on the other side of the pandemic, we'll be able to build on those. And there's likely to be pent-up demand for engaging and supporting students in that pursuit.
Great. All right, so we have 2 more. The term learning loss is a loaded term and one that many are intentionally avoiding. It tends to place blame on students and teachers. It suggests that students failed to learn, and it accepts a very test-focused way of assessing the situation. Some are referring to lost opportunity instead and seeking a more holistic recovery plan. How do you frame this, and how do you encourage the SUSD community to view it?
I think it's a really good question and an important point. So oftentimes we'll have deficit language, so learning loss or an achievement gap, things that may signify that there's a problem with the student. In a pandemic, what we have is to the part of the question that gets to a more positive framing is we've lost certain opportunities for learning. Learning's been disrupted in terms of a traditional sense. And so our focus has been to pivot from talking about a gap or learning loss to really how can we accelerate learning? Wherever students are on the continuum, how do we accelerate their learning so that they are on track or catching up to where we would have expected them to be during a traditional school year? And that's not placing any blame on the student or the system. It's just a product of where we are. We have that challenge all of the time. We have students that start behind, and we've got an opportunity to help accelerate their learning. And so reframing that, we're looking at what are the specific needs of students? What can we do for the balance of this school year and into the summer to accelerate their learning, create meaningful opportunities targeted to their individual needs so that they can be on track when we resume school in the fall.
Okay. And how will you encourage students to engage in extracurricular activities and build social connections and relationships as part of post-pandemic recovery?
So I think in part, much of that will happen organically. One of the things that I learned in talking to my colleague as a benefit of a full day at the middle school and high school level is it does create this sense of normalcy, that student clubs meet at lunch like they used to, that you have those opportunities for the social engagement. And so it breaks down some of the barriers and concerns. I worry about students who transition from middle school to high school and haven't really had a full transition, or from the elementary into the middle school. Thinking about, and the ones that will be making that transition from this year to next, how we support students in the transition is where I really think we should spend some time and energy, because those are big transitions, moving from an elementary to a middle school or middle school into high school. And so I think focusing our effort there can help support them being successful in the transition. And I just think there's a human desire for connection. And the more opportunities we have to resume that sense of normalcy, the more our students will engage.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time as always. We really appreciate having you here. So thank you again.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, and I appreciate all the work that SBC does in support of our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. So tonight, our feature presentation is Matt Lynn's, and I will have Karen Giffords, who is the co-chair of our Social Responsibility Committee, who's been working very closely with Mr. Lynn's and with Shannon Cronn to create this presentation and just other aspects of their committee. So Karen Gifford.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Emmy. So I'm co-chairing this ad hoc anti-bullying committee. We call it the Social Responsibility Committee because we want to emphasize the positive and what kids and teachers and parents all should be doing rather than what they shouldn't, just not anti, right? So we have a specific purpose. I'm co-chairing it with Lisa Kanarish, and we have a specific purpose to present our findings and evidence-based practices, things that work to promote a healthy school culture. So we're going to present these to our reps, our SPC reps, and then have y'all vote on whether or not we then take this further to present our recommendations to cabinet. And these are recommendations on practices, policy that would apply to all of our schools. So very exciting to be doing this work, and very excited also to be introducing Shannon Cronn, our Director of Support Services. She's gonna, I'll pass it over to her and she can talk for a second about support services and what they do. And then she's going to introduce Matt Lynn's, who will present most of the program tonight on a practice called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. So Shannon, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hello?
Yep, we see and hear you.
Okay, can you see me?
Yep.
You can see and hear me? Okay,
Good.
great. Sorry, I was connected to my phone and to the computer. So I've got a 4.5-year-old, so I'm trying to multitask tonight. So thank you so much for allowing us to be here and for your interest in PBIS. We're really excited about this presentation, and I look forward to introducing you to Matt Lynn's in a minute. I am Shannon Cronn, the Director of Support Services. So support services, we joke that we kind of deal with everything that does not have to do with, academics, although it impacts academics. So everything having to do with social emotional learning, behavioral supports, supporting students through 504 plans. We oversee counselors, really our nursing services, security. So a lot of different areas, support services kind of touches on. So tonight, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is PBIS, or multi-tiered systems of support. So anybody that has attended a presentation has probably learned that we really follow a comprehensive support system. So we look at how do we support all students through that tier 1, that first best instruction, whether we're talking about academics or behavior? And then how do we acknowledge that some students may need more? So whether that's behavioral supports, whether that's social emotional supports, academic supports, and then how do we acknowledge that some students really, need more intense or individualized supports, which is that tier 3. So tonight, Matt Linz is going to share with you what that looks like from a behavioral standpoint, and what that framework on our different campuses, entails, and really how we kind of shift away from that negative, expecting students to know how to behave, into more of a positive, how do we teach behavioral expectations and then acknowledge those positive behaviors on our campus. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Linz, who is the perfect person to present on Pbis because he may be the most positive person I know. So I am thrilled to have him as our clinical services coordinator this year. And he's really, truly an expert when it comes to Pbis, MTSS. He worked with Scottsdale a few years ago when we were chosen as one of 13 districts in the country to participate in a research project with the U.S. Department of Education. And with that research project, we were, implementing MTSS on our campuses to look at the effectiveness. And Matt was one of our leaders at that time and coached our campuses. So I'm excited to turn over this presentation and introduce Matt Linz.
Oh, thank you so much, Shannon. I've just had the pleasure of coming back this year and working with Shannon because so much of what we're doing this year stems off of what was established years ago. 15 years ago, it was up at Desert Canyon with some friends in the room here, starting off Pbis. So this is something that's not new. It's not just brand new. We've been doing this for a while. We started back in the day calling it continuous campus improvement. And so we would poll our staff, we would come together, we'd come up with kind of a targeted area of need, and then we'd address it. And a lot's changed since the very beginning, but much of what entails the core composition of the framework is essentially stayed the same. There's pillars of this program that really make it shine, that allow campuses to move full steam ahead with it. And like Shannon was saying, to recognize the positive. There's so many different aspects of this program that really allow us to build a positive climate on a campus, as well as recognize student exemplars who are doing the right thing. It also entails how we look at discipline from a very systematic standpoint to ensure that we have proper systems in place to address concerns as they present themselves. So I've crafted together just a slide deck here that go over some of the major components of Pbis. Taken this from a multitude of different trainings that have been delivered over the years to parents and staff, to classified support from all different areas. Many of the slides that we'll see here were slides that were given to us from the folks that were training us under that federal research grant. And so want to make sure that I give them some accolades for some of the resources that they've provided. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Now, I'm a teacher at heart. I will always be a teacher. It's a wonderful job. And so through this presentation, I can't stand and talk. I'm sorry. It's in my training where I do need to stop and kind of have some discussion here and there. So I'm going to be calling on folks either just to give some input. I feel that the best discussions are those where everyone has a chance to discuss. not just sit and get a presentation. So there will be some questions throughout where I'm just asking for a couple folks to share your experiences on things that you have in terms of Pbis and some of the framework, and see if we can get some dialogue stirred up here. So with that, I'd like to share my screen. Is there whoever started, are you able, I just went to the share
yes,
screen.
sorry, I need to make you a co-host. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
There you go. You should be set now.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Let's see here. And I'm going to say the words that we've heard so many times through all this. Can you see my screen? Awesome. All right. So let me go ahead and present here. And I am not seeing that. So I'm just going to present from this so we can see what's coming up as well. But to start things off, we have achieving goals. So ultimately, when we're looking at Pbis, we're looking at the intersection between systems, data, and practices. So we put 4 systems in place. We could see this diagram here where we have systems in place that are using a data to make decisions. From that data, we then infuse practices into our systems, into our campuses. This is all under the overall impetus of supporting student behavior to ensure that we're creating positive climates for our campus, and that we're achieving so in a way that supports both the social competencies and the academic achievement of our students. So that's just, this is a widely used diagram in the MTSS, Pbis world, and it just kind of frames the thinking regarding this framework. So what is Pbis? Positive Behavior Interventions and Support is a process in which we create safer, more effective schools. We know if we minimize the amount of discipline, and we're able to do so in a way that highlights the positive, that our students shine. Our students shine in climates that are positive, in climates that are supportive, in ways in which we teach them the social capital to be successful in academia. What we want to do is ensure that we're not just teaching the academic skills, but we're teaching how to be a student. And that's really the framework at which Pbis stems from. It's a systems approach to get educating all children by developing a research-based school-wide classroom behavior support system. So not only does it address the classroom, it addresses all areas of the campus, but it's essentially a framework. It has pillars that are put into place, and through that framework, then campuses do it in different ways. They have a lot of autonomy at how which they roll this out, but there are those pillars that we come back to ensure that we're doing with fidelity to make sure that this is done across our campus and that it lasts a long duration of time. This process focuses on improving a school's ability to teach and support positive behavior for all students. So what we want to do is we focus on teaching the positive. We reinforce by focusing on the positive. We're consistently coming back to ensure that there is a positive climate on campus. All right. So why is this a school-wide approach? When we do this school-wide, it reduces challenging student behavior. We're proactive, we're positive, and we're consistent. Sometimes you'll see systems that are different from classroom to classroom. And one of the first processes in establishing a Pbis framework on a campus is having teachers and students come together to determine what are those positive expectations. We'll talk a little bit about a matrix in a little bit, but everyone comes together and says, what does it mean to be a successful Don or a successful Titan? What does it mean to come to campus and to succeed in our classrooms? What do you expect from students? What do you expect from peers? What do you expect of each other in these different areas around campus to create a positive climate here wherever your campus is? So at this time, just want to kind of gauge the crowd here. In the education world, we're always assessing prior knowledge. So at the beginning of any instruction, we want to ensure we assess prior knowledge. So just throwing it out there, let's see if we have any folks that would like to chime in with their microphones. But what do you already know about Pbis? All right, let's go ahead and throw it in the chat then. What are some things that you are familiar with? Anything at all. It could be one word, it could be a couple of words. What do you know about Pbis, the positive behavior interventions and supports? All right. Laura says, doesn't relate to clip charts. Gets happy notes. Yes, there's happy notes that come back. There's a prize that comes back. Tier 1 works for 80% of students. Each school implements it differently. There is some background knowledge in this room about Pbis, and I love to see that. That means that we are doing our job and making this thing happen on our campuses. So thank you so much. Expectation, teaching, reinforcement, discipline. Absolutely. It's campus-based. It's focused on the positive. I think we really hit just the basic foundation. Like, that is the framework. That is why we do it. We do it because we want to establish expectations on campus. We do it because we want to teach students using those expectations. We find the kids that are doing the right thing. Absolutely. And we celebrate it. We celebrate kids that are doing the right thing. It causes us to be positive. As teachers, I'll tell you what, this framework changed my life. Because if I go to my day and I'm in my classroom and I make it a point that I'm going to focus on the positive, I go home and I think about the positive, and I come back to the school the next day and I'm positive, and my classroom's a place that just, it feels good. I have a vibration in my room that feels great because I'm focusing on the positive. If I'm teaching using the negative, which has happened before, it happens. Sometimes it creates a little bit more of a negative climate. And then through a negative climate, we actually see instances of discipline escalate, because kids that, might be kind of on the fence in terms of tier 1 and tier 2 start to err to the side of tier 2. So we actually see, when we address just the negative and go through a punitive model, solely through a punitive model, that we actually see more discipline on a campus. So that's the power of Pbis, is on top of what's already established in that system of discipline, layering on a positive framework at which people can recognize when kids are doing the right thing. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. Love to see a parent training at the site level so parents can reinforce the same expectations. Phenomenal. So there's different ways. I'm going to write that down because that's a thing that we can bring back. But part of the framework is really looping in the parents, and there's different ways that sites can do that to have that continuous communication. I know my students, my kids sometimes bring home, they have on their folders the matrix. And so it says all the expectations within the school, and teachers on a daily basis will kind of leave a comment or highlight something in green that my student has done really well. And there, you know, if there has been a challenge, they communicate, hey, this is the area on the matrix that we can kind of ramp up and use some additional support with. And so that's been pretty valuable at home, just to see some of that communication about specific expectations on those campuses. So that's a wonderful, wonderful suggestion. Thank you, Laura. All right, so let's go ahead and get back to the presentation here. Thank you all so much for chiming into the chat. I love the dialogue and just get ideas from you. This is consistently growing. And so part of Pbis is that we do go out to our community. It's built on a team-paced approach. It's also built on input from all stakeholders and parents, such a critical member of our community. To have parent input in our Pbis teams is a valuable component of the entire framework. So thank you so much for just contributing to the chat and being part of this discussion and part of your Pbis teams. So let's go back to, why do we need this? Well, this really, Pbis stems from the anti-expulsion suspension movement. So way back when folks got around and said, you know, suspension and expulsions, they're not really working. And if any of you are familiar with John Hattie's work, it's kind of jargon used in education. It's the largest meta-analysis that's ever been done. It's a culminating effort that brings a multitude of different research studies together. He's got a graph, and on that graph, it's basically what works in education. And at the top of the graph, you have things like teacher efficacy and students setting their own goals and measuring their own efforts. At the bottom of the graph, you see suspension and expulsion. So it's really, it's not beneficial. It's been researched time and time again. Suspension and expulsion is not necessarily the way to go in terms of making gains on a campus. For one, it takes hours away from instruction time. So if we look at this slide here, we can see that, approximate times for each referral. Every time a student's referred and goes down to the office, that's about 20 minutes of time for the student. It takes about 10 minutes of time for that teacher, at least 10 minutes to write up that referral. And then our administrators, who are stretched thin, are spending about 15 minutes for every referral. Now, if you have 100 referrals a year, which is kind of a conservative number if you're looking at a very large campus, that's looking at 2,000 student minutes of instruction that has been lost. That's 1,000 teacher minutes. That's 1,500 administrative minutes. So that's about 75 hours or 12 days that's been lost. That's a huge amount of time that we can't get back that has been lost due to discipline. So the discipline it's not like Pbis is saying you should no longer do discipline. It's just an additional layer to try to combat some of this, to try to teach the expectations, to teach the skills to be successful without solely relying on the punitive. So back in our day, when I think about going through school, it was the do not list. Right? If you did something wrong, you stayed in and you were told what not to do. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do that. Write it 1,000 times on the board. Here's the list of the don't do's. This is what Pbis would kind of like to get away from, because if we do too many don't do's, it does bring down the positive vibe on our campus. So what we're trying to do is a little bit more of the, let's see here, where's my slide? I got a picture on the slide here. All right. Sorry, folks. Just trying to advance my slide here. There we go. I'll use the arrows instead if there's a large picture. That was easy. All right. So if we look at how we teach everything else, if we don't know how to teach a student how to read, or if we don't know, if a student doesn't know how to read, what do? We teach the student how to read. We provide opportunities for that student to practice reading, and we teach them how to read. If they don't know how to swim, we get in the pool, we practice them to swim. If they don't know how to do math, we get out our manipulatives, we teach them explicitly how to multiply. If they don't know how to drive, we get in the passenger seat and we guide our students around our neighborhoods. We teach them how to drive. But if a student doesn't know how to behave, oftentimes we go straight for the punishment. We don't necessarily reteach what the expected behavior is. We always use this analogy. If you have a math class and everyone came to math, and we said, okay, Johnny, what's 2 + 2? And Johnny said 5. And we said, no, that's wrong. Go sit in the back corner. And we said, okay, what's 2 + 2? Oh, it's 7. That is incorrect. Go to the office. All right, Johnny. At some point, we would have to sit Johnny down and say, listen, Johnny, 2 + 2 is equal to 4. This is how we got there. This is kind of what it's based upon. This is how you get to that answer. We would teach what 2 + 2 was. At some time, we need to make sure that we're teaching our students how to behave in class. We can't just punish without the reteaching and expect that they're going to get it right. And so MTSSB or Pbis attempts to teach the behavioral expectations to all students. We can't just expect students to come through the door and already know how to behave in our classrooms and on our campuses. We have to accept the fact that there's going to be students that need some additional support. Everyone's going to need some understanding of what the expectations are. And then if students are showing that they don't necessarily know what those expectations are, we have to provide some additional opportunities for those students to know what the expectations are and to show those expectations. When we focus on reteaching instead of the punitive, it is a big mind shift that will change the culture of a campus. Because if we repetitively focus on the positive and recognize when students are doing the right thing, it becomes a habit. And if it becomes a habit for the adults on campus, it becomes a habit for the students on campus. And pretty soon people are doing things out of habit because it's the right thing to do, because it becomes second nature and it's ingrained in their understanding of what we do on campus. So we teach our expectations using matrices. And so we have some exemplars here. You might see some of your home campuses. Here we have from Mojave, some of the expectations in the common area. So you can see that we've come up with 4 overarching expectations. And sometimes these form fancy acronyms and sometimes they don't. This one here happens to spell out pause. Students should be able to repeat back at a very high rate. So when we do some inventories and assess whether campuses have strong Pbis frameworks, we're looking for 80% of our students to be able to recite what this acronym is and be able to say what these overarching expectations are. And so within these expectations, then we have specific behavioral expectations within certain areas. So this is where we, at the very beginning, when a campus is getting started, we talk with the entire staff, we talk with students, we get stakeholder input, and we determine what are some of those behavioral expectations within these categories in those areas. That's what we teach. We teach those, we repeat them, we recognize, we reinforce those. Here's one from Ingleside, be real in the classroom. So they are keep it real, respectful, respect, excellence, accountability, and leadership. We have Desert Canyon's expectations. Now, this is what's called the matrix. So those others were just within one location, but you can see when teams of teachers get together and get the input of students, we come up with expectations surrounding those acronyms. So Desert Canyons is CR square, caring, respectful, and responsible. Here's the different areas: the classroom, the outdoor areas, the indoor hallways, the restrooms, the cafeteria, and the school events. And then within each one of theirs, there's like 3 to 4 different expectations that could be easily recited by teachers and staff and even students to each other on how we behave across our campus. All right, so I just want to get a quick gauge. Let's go ahead and, if we can, in the chat, just say a quick yes or no. Have you seen your matrix? Just want to gauge quickly. All right, so we do have, this is good information. On a t-shirt. All right, love to see it on a t-shirt. That's innovative. That's a lot of no's, folks. So that means I have a lot of work to do because we want to make sure that we're getting these out to parents. And so that we all have the same understanding as to what those expectations are. I know for my own experience with my kindergarten, my 2 kindergarten twins and my 2nd grade daughter, we reinforce those expectations at home. And so it becomes very helpful when you know what those expectations are to be able to communicate, you know, if in the classroom we are to be, let's say, to raise our hand before sharing, you know, maybe around the dinner table, we work on just our turn to talk. And so that's just one example of how we can reinforce at home some of the expectations that are taught at school. So that is another note, is to work with teams to ensure that we get expectations out to everyone. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that information. All right, so heading back to our presentation here. All right, so teaching those expectations, now that we have those matrices, there's different ways at which we teach those expectations. And so we consistently, on an ongoing basis, throughout the day, at the beginning of the year and throughout the day, teach those school-wide expectations. What we want to do is we want to praise more than we correct. We'll talk about this more in a little bit, but when we reteach, we're using the positive. Thank you for coming in quietly. Thank you for taking your seat. Thank you for taking out your agenda. Thank you for being quiet when I asked you to get quiet for this presentation. Thank you for focusing on the speaker. When we praise more often than we punish, we still get our desired behavior. We're still getting exactly what we want, but we're building the positive climate within our classrooms. By doing so, we're talking to our students using a respectful tone, and there's a very specific way in which we do what's called an error correction as well. So sometimes we need to move beyond the positive praise and get to an error correction, and there's trainings and teachings as to how to deliver that. We always want to look for the positive first. So if I see one kid running, I don't say stop running. I look at the kids that are walking and say, hey, nice job walking, nice job walking. Typically the kid who's running is going to stop running because they want to be recognized too. So we're communicating what those expectations are using a positive, respectful tone. You might have seen some of these tickets coming home. So the tickets, these are the positive recognition programs that accompany the matrices. So once we've taught those expectations, and typically we'll teach those expectations during like a passport day early in the year, and sometimes during a booster after a large break, we'll teach those explicitly. We'll go through our entire campus and teach those things. But then on a day-to-day basis, we rely on positive praise and recognition tickets to continue to teach those positive expectations. So when we might recognize a student who is showing our positive expectations in class, we'll say, hey, thank you, Susie, for paying attention during your presentation. Here's a ticket. Now, these tickets can add up to different prizes. I like to tell campuses that it's not necessarily always about just the prize. It's more about the praise. We want to use that student exemplar as an opportunity to teach everybody what our behavioral expectations are. So there are sometimes prizes associated with this, but really the impetus of the whole thing is to praise our students, to use the student exemplars as a way to teach our expectations. And so there is a very specific way at which we deliver these things. First off, we want to say the student name. Why? Because we know from research and sales that when we use people's names, their attention perks up. As soon as we say a student's name, they perk up and they're listening. So we use the name, we acknowledge the specific behavior. So we train teachers, don't just say good job. Right? Because you don't know who's doing the good job. And if you don't use the student name, we could be talking about a kid who's not doing the right thing. So you need to say the student name and you need to tell them what they're doing. Why? Because this is a little marketing campaign in our classrooms. We're marketing what it is we want to see. And then we say what that specific behavior is. So example, thank you, Steve, for being safe by walking in the hallway. So we use the expectation, we talk about that behavior. We also advocate that we don't just wait for that shining moment, you know, it's like that incredible best thing we've seen all year from our students when that student drops their books in the hallway and the other student comes over and picks up the books. We don't wait for just those instances. Yes, we want to give tickets for those as well, but we want to give tickets for the norms. And this is one of the biggest shifts that needs to happen in order for campuses to really embrace the framework. You praise on the norms. You don't just say, hey, the kids should know that already coming into class. No, you thank them and you say, great job. Thank you for coming into class quietly. We don't say, hey, they should just know that. Well, we need to recognize it because that way we tell everybody that's how you should come into class. So we just recognize on the normal behaviors. And when we do, we communicate routinely throughout the year in a positive way what those skills are to be successful in our class. Why do we do this? Because not only do we teach our expectations, but we're building relationships. Every time we give a ticket and tell a kid they're doing a great job, we're strengthening that relationships. And we know if we're going to ask students to do a ton of work, you know, in the educational world, we call it the frustrational level. If we're doing our job, we're going to ask our students to get to that frustrational level at which here's what they already know, here's what they don't know, here's the zone of frustration. If we're going to ask kids to get to that frustration level, we need to have some pretty significant relationships built from them. We need to be able to praise them and ensure that we have a strong relationship with them. So if they are getting frustrated, they trust us to say, hey, I get it. We're gonna keep you right here. You're in a safe classroom. You're safe to take risks. You're safe to get wrong answers. You're safe in here. And by praising and by giving recognitions, we're creating those safe climates. All right. We also now know that praising is the quickest way to change behavior. So the antiquated just discipline is not a great way to change behavior. We can refer, we can suspend, we can expel, but are we going to change behavior? Not as fast as if we praise. We can change 80% of our behaviors just by pointing out the positive. So let's start here. Let's start by focusing on the positive, by praising and changing 80% of the behaviors by using the positive. All right, so I just want to see, I heard a couple of success stories already. Either let's unmute our microphones or in the chat. I'd like to hear some stories because I love these stories. It's part of my favorite part of this job is just to hear some of the celebrations that happen when kids are recognized for doing the right thing. So if you parents have a story of a time that your kid got recognized, if you could load it into the chat, or I'd love to hear some other voices, chime on in. Let's hear a story of when you've received a ticket. Great seeing you too, Mrs. Sanowski. Awesome. So Emmy says that she has always heard when she receives a ticket. Awesome. I'm very curious, maybe just like the Matrix, have you heard of receiving a ticket? Has your child received a ticket? Just a quick yes or no would be perfect. Just to see in this just sample of, oh, this is great news. All right. All right, so tickets, yes, tickets are getting out there. Tickets are being used, but the Matrix is probably something that we could ramp up on. All right. Thank you for that information, Emmy. I am certainly, that's why we're ramping up. We're certainly ramping back up. We're getting this out there. We're communicating on an ongoing basis with our staff and our administrators that we're here. We're here to ramp things up. We're here to support them. So thank you for that. And just know that we are continuously reaching out to campus administrators to continuously build this across our district. Awesome. Great to hear that we're getting rewards and students are getting recognized and getting celebrated for doing the right thing. So just love seeing all those yeses. That is awesome. All right. So that's a lot based about the teaching of positive expectations. And we know that we can address 80% of our behaviors with positive praise. But there does come a time when we do need to ensure that we are using some discipline. And so what campuses have is, this is a major pillar of our framework, it is the flow chart. And so what this is a flow chart that distinguishes office managed and a classroom managed violation. And so if we have classroom managed, those are things that are being managed by the teacher. Things like you can see here, and every campus comes up with their own flow chart. So this is just an example pulled off the internet. But here's some examples of some minors. You have being disruptive, one time, a quick blurt out during a presentation, being defiant, maybe rolling of the eyes, or disrespect, a dress code violation, a simple physical contact where maybe you have a bump in a hallway, a language misuse. These are things that teachers in classrooms have said, hey, we've got this. We can manage those behaviors. Now, you will see on the left-hand side that if those things happen, we're coming in and we're reteaching. So there's a positive expectation that is the flip side of some of these minors. For example, disrespectful, we probably have something about being respectful on our campus. Physical aggression, or physical contact, we probably have something about keeping our hands to ourselves. So what we tell teachers and train teachers is, on that first instance, we're bringing the student up, we're having a one-on-one conversation, and we're saying, hey, remember when we talked about that expectation? Hey, let's see that next time. I know you can do it. I have faith in you. Let's make sure we do that the next time. If it happens a second time, we're usually telling that student, hey, this is the second time I've talked to you today. I want to make sure that we're getting this across, that this is something that we need to get done today. If it's happening a third and fourth time, that's when we start to notify parents. We notify the administration, where we want to ensure that we're getting the students some additional support to get this behavioral skill addressed and taught. And so that's kind of the minor side. Now, there's things that are majors that go directly to the office, which would include, fighting, bullying, drugs, things of that nature would go straight to the office. Those aren't things where we would pull a kid to the side and say, hey, I need you to learn this. We would have that go directly to the office. So this flow chart really gets everyone on the same page as to what's a minor and what's a major, what's dealt with in the classroom, where you would have a reteach instance with that student, and you would kind of track as to how many times you had those reteaches in a day. After so many, you would refer for some additional support, but then there's certain things that just go directly to the office. Now, we talked about those minors and how we talk to students in those situations where we might have a minor violation. There is a positive classroom climate framework that tells us some strategies and how to deliver some of those error corrections. And when we do, we want to be brief. We just talk about it. We say, hey, here's the expectation. I know you can do it next time. And then as soon as we see the kid do it, we say, that's it. Awesome job. That's what I was talking about. Thank you for paying attention during the presentation and not disrupting. You just praise it. We praise them and you let them know that's what we're looking for. You use that time as an opportunity to reteach that expectation. We're calm and we're doing it in private. We're pulling those kids up to the podium and we're having a mini reteach, and we're doing so in private. And so why do we address both? Well, we know that whatever we point our attention to is what we'll get more of. There is kind of this magic ratio in the Pbis world that actually came from marriage counseling. So the history of this 4-to-1 praise stems from marriage counseling. A marriage counselor came up with this and said, you know what? In any relationship, they usually last if people point out the positive 4 times as many times as they point out the negative. I've tried this with my wife at home and it really works. When I've tried it with my kids at home, this is a great way to infuse a positive climate in whatever area you are in with whatever relationship you're with. To praise 4 times as many times as you're redirecting, point out 4 things that you like to 1 thing that you'd like to see different. It really builds strong relationships. And once again, we're banking on those relationships in education. We're ensuring that students feel safe and supported on our campuses. We need to build those relationships, and we do so by creating these 4-to-1s, 4 praises to 1 error correction. All right, so that's kind of the classroom reteaching. I also want to just tell you about the team aspect of it, because administrators aren't just coming out with Pbis from their offices, and it's not just one teacher that's doing it in their classroom. The Pbis framework really depends on a team on a campus that looks at data on a regular basis to determine where to teach and reteach our students. So why do we get together as a campus with representatives from across our school? Because we want to build the social capital within our students. We want to make sure that we're creating effective learning environments and we're addressing some of the primary needs in terms of social skills across our campus. And so on those teams, we typically have administrators, there's a team lead, We have some facilitators. So these are made up of teachers, psychologists, counselors, social workers, administrators. There's a minute taker. There's someone who looks at data and aggregates the data, and then other participating members. Now, we use a lot of data. And so when we are using data to drive our decisions, what we do is we take a look at some of the discipline data that comes through. We'll use discipline data, we'll use attendance data, we will use student survey data, parent survey data. We'll use different data sources to gauge where we can really focus in our efforts. From that data, then we identify what's called a precision statement or a targeted area of need. We try to drill down to really the who, what's, whens, and whys. And then from that, we start to think about how can we positively address the situation. Because it's okay, you know, if a team comes together and says, hey, we want our kids to be good, we don't want them to be bad, let's teach them to be good, that becomes very difficult. But if we say, okay, team, let's look at our discipline data. We had 5 fifth graders, 5 incidences of fifth graders at recess who were engaged in physical contact. That's a much different training. I can come through and start to retrain or reteach the students as to some of those expectations on the playground. I might target my 5th grade class. To reteach them exactly what those expectations are. I might restructure and provide some additional support during lunch recess. I might do a retraining to my staff, or I might come up with a new recognition campaign. Like, hey, whatever grade level has no aggression on the playground is going to get a pizza party or whatever it might be. So we're always looking at data to determine where we can reteach, retrain, restructure, or recognize. Once we come up with some of those ideas, we action plan and we make those things happen on a campus. By doing so, we can look at our data the month afterwards and say, hey, did our plan work? And if it did, we celebrate. We have even more of a positive campus. If it didn't work, we go back to the drawing board and say, hey, what can we tweak here to make this campus even more positive climate around campus? And so this all kind of fits in what's called the multi-tiered systems of support. This tiered systems of support looks at our student populations through tiers. And so the tier 1, that's 80% of our students. So that's the majority of our kids. When we're teaching those matrices and we're recognizing with the tickets and we're coming into classrooms and we're teaching what those expectations are within a specific area, we're hoping that 80% of those students will respond to that. We're hoping that about 80% of our students might have, 0 to 1 referrals. But then we're going to have 15% of our students that are in that tier 2 group. These students might have some additional reteaches. That's why we start to really look at some of the amount of reteaches that students are getting in a classroom. Folks that might have 2 or 3 referrals, there's some additional supports that we put into place. And so there's different interventions that we would put into place where students might meet have additional time with a social worker or a counselor. They might have a check-in, check-out person. There might be some additional reteaching with that individual with like an SEL coach. There's going to be some time where that person might have some additional instruction as to those expectations. If they're still not responding into that group environment, then we might go to a tier 3 approach and might have something like a behavior plan, an individualized behavior plan, where that individual would have additional opportunities to practice some of those behaviors. So we look at this tiered systems of support. We're trying to get 80% of our kids with just the teaching of the initial expectations. If we identify students that might need some additional support, we have the interventions there to support them. And so when those teams are getting together, they're really looking at, first and foremost, what are those targeted areas of need? What are we going to do to teach our entire campus those targeted areas of need? We look at that data. So we come up to step number 4. We look at that data to craft a new precision statement. What's the who, what, when, where, and why? We brainstorm as a team what those specific courses of action we can do are. We come up with one solution, 1 or 2 solution, and then we action plan. Now we have teams of teachers on here. Teachers are teaching for 6-7 hours a day. They're planning for another hour. They're grading for 2 hours a day. There's not a whole lot of time, but we action plan. We say, hey, who's going to do this part? Who's going to step up and make this flyer? Who's going to do the email? And so we action plan who's going to do what. We then get that action plan out there. We try it. We make it happen for a month, and then we circle back at our next meeting. We start off by reviewing what our past precision statement was, what was our goal, and then we look at the data to see if we achieved it. We've seen significant gains on campuses in reducing the number of referrals by using this and communicating what those action plans are to our campuses, getting all hands on deck and all teachers involved. And through this process, we have dropped referrals on campuses time and time again. Just to give you an example, I was a safe and supportive specialist at Coronado a few years ago, and this process got us to cut our referrals in half. So it really has a significant gain when you use this process with fidelity and you get teams to use this agenda and communicate it with all stakeholders. Focusing on the positive works. It makes for a positive campus. Kids love it. And I feel that teachers are happier, and as a community, we become happier by really focusing on the positive and having this framework set up. So ultimately, what we want through this whole process is we want positive behavior. We want students to enjoy coming to school, to be excited about doing the right thing, to have teachers that are focusing on the positive nature of their students, and overall to have just a positive campus. So that's a whole lot of information. I wanted to share with you some of the major portions of the framework. So I feel that this presentation really frames out some of the major components, but just want to open up the floor for questions about the framework or current practices or where we're at with the district. So any question is a good one. Please let me know. Either in the chat or just unmuting your microphones. What questions do you have about anything that was delivered here?
I have a question. I put it in the chat, but how is this implemented on high school campuses? What does it look like in high school?
So every campus is a little different. Right now, we have, so Saguaro and Coronado have done this for a while. They were part of a safe and supportive grant that Shannon and I were part of years ago. So they've been doing this a while. Now we've had a little bit of a resurgence on those campuses. And so they are, I'm going out to Saguaro next month and doing another staff training just to kind of bring it back. The AP over at Coronado has just been going full steam ahead with this. Arcadia is ramping up this year. They got a grant last year. They've been building it. And so this is really ramping up on that campus. The other 2 campuses, we're looking at data. And so even though we might not have the full framework, we've identified areas of the framework that we've honed in on. The campus up at Desert Mountain, I was working with earlier this year. They were doing some of their staff evaluation, looking at their staff evaluation instrument, and had me up there to talk about some of those positive classroom climate strategies to create safe and supportive classrooms. So every campus does a little bit different. I would say that 3 of our high school campuses are Pbis campuses, and then the other 2 use portions of the framework within their systems.
But what does it look like on their campus? What do they like? What do the kids hear about it? My daughter goes to Saguaro and she's a sophomore, and it's an amazingly positive campus. And I attribute that to the elementary schools and Mojave using the Pbis and creating this positive atmosphere. So it's an incredibly positive campus, but I never hear about the PBIS stuff like I used to hear about Pbis and Dusty Dollars. I'm happy that it's positive, but I'm wondering, like, what does it look like on campus that I'm not hearing about? Granted, she's a high schooler, so she doesn't tell me about a lot of things.
Yes. And so, there are different ways at which high schools give out some of those tickets, right? The ticket and the recognition looks different at a high school. And so, whereas with a high school student, we might not necessarily see our kids coming home waving their tickets at, and right. But the system in itself is in place. Like they have their signage up. I just worked with their AP over there, Katie, at restructuring she's so awesome. She's wonderful. So we just looked at their retraining days. So they just had a full PBIS booster, and we revitalized some of their lesson plans and made them fun. We said, here's your matrix. Here's the expectation within these areas. They had a whole schedule. They did the passport day, and they revitalized their lesson plan. So they taught all the expectations to be successful. I think they're having me out next month to kind of do a booster with their staff in terms of the 4-to-1 and how to deliver the tickets. So I feel like they're really ramping back up. I'm really proud at some of the efforts that they're doing to boost things back up. And so I know that they have the major pillars. I think that they're just kind of rebuilding and reboosting some of the major pillars on that campus.
So yeah, that would be a question I have, is that, so basically you reach out to every school in the district and then work on forming a program with them. And then, so you work directly with the administrators, and then you occasionally come and speak to the staff, or do you always come and speak to the staff to do a training? Is that always part of it?
It really varies. Many of our campuses, not all of our campuses, went through some initial trainings. And so those initial trainings happen at different times. And so some went through an organization here in Arizona, the COI organization, who took campuses through a series of different trainings to establish the framework. Some were during the MTSS grant that Shannon spoke of earlier. There's been kind of different times at which different campuses have really jumped on board and gone through some significant trainings. With those trainings, they have established their matrices and then really promoted it to staff, typically rolling out day one at the beginning of the year with some of these documents. The documents would include things like your ticket, your flow chart, your matrix, your passport day schedule, telling teachers how we're going to teach it. And then coming back, like I always advocate for administrators to bring it back to surface monthly. Like during your staff meeting, tell your staff what your precision statement is. What is the targeted area of need that's showing itself in the data? What's your action plan? What are we doing this month? How did we do on our action plan last month? By doing that, it keeps it alive and keeps everybody kind of on the same page as to what those core areas of need are.
Is there a way to find out? Would we reach out to our principal to find out what the action plan is for our school?
I think that's a great start. Most of the folks that have really ramped up on PBIS this year have come up with some action plans. A lot of campuses will have a climate goal in their SIP plan. So the SIP plan being the site improvement plan that's required by the state. In ESSA, which is the framing legislation that guides us in education. It's the most recent iteration of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was enacted back in the 60s. The most recent version of that is the ESSA. And in ESSA, they've said that part of your site improvement plan can be focused on climate. So with that, we've seen kind of an influx of folks targeting climate again as an area of need. But I think that would probably be a great way to find out, how the PBIS team is doing on campus. It's just, hey, I just want to know, what are you working on? just heard a presentation about targeted area of need, just to kind of gauge what the campus is currently working on.
And one last question. Did you say that you also do presentations for parents as well so that they can also use these strategies with the children for continuation?
Absolutely. And I'd be happy if that was something that any campus would like to move forward with. I could come out during parent night and do a presentation as well. Because also in this position is the SEL world. And so we've really been ramping up we talked about tier 1 during Pbis presentation being that, hey, the things we're teaching to everybody. Well, SEL goes along the same lines. And due to our current reality, we know that we need to ramp up some of those SEL strategies. Our department, the support service department, we are doing monthly parent nights. And so Shannon talked about this month building strong relationships. Last month, we did one on cyber safety. The month prior, we did one on managing stress. The month before that, I think we did another one about relationships, but we're really framing together parent nights that would help with some strategies around SEL or just things in terms of what parents are facing right now. So please keep your eyes out for that. We do have a safe and support service newsletter that goes out monthly that we're sending out to our principals. So that is also something if you want to keep it's kind of in tune as to some of those SEL strategies. Our team of social workers has been working diligently to put together monthly newsletters with strategies that we can use at home to guide us through, challenging situations. So those are two resources. I'm always happy to give presentations. We have them going on monthly, and then we also have that newsletter. So those are some different resources coming out of our department that could assist.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Looks like Bryn has a question.
Hi, Matt. Could you talk to us about the role that SROs play in this Pbis?
Certainly. It really depends on the campus. It's not systematic in terms of every campus having SROs that are looped into the committee. I have seen it before. SROs they're busy, they have a lot going on, and sometimes it's
when you say they're busy, what are they busy doing?
Well, in terms of asking, we're meeting at, let's say, 7:15 in the morning or after hours, which can cause conflicts because sometimes those outside of the school day hours are doing wellness checks on students or following up on folks who might have some truancy issues. We might be calling folks in for, whatever that violation might be. So teachers, we can throw something on the calendar and say, hey, let's all get together on this day. Sometimes it's difficult for an SRO to have that same level of flexibility before and after school.
Okay, that makes sense. I interrupted you, so if you can go back and explain the role that they play in your program.
Absolutely. We really try to get everyone trained on a campus as to some of these pillars. And so we work with classified, we work with SROs in terms of recognizing the positive of having a 4-to-1 ratios of praising students when there has been, minor level types of infractions to try to redirect some of those behaviors using praise rather than always going for the punitive. Also, we have trained a lot this past year in what's called restorative practices, which comes straight out of the world, the police world. So here in Scottsdale and in Phoenix, we had some trainings a few years ago about some of the restorative practices that they're using in the juvenile justice system and the amount of impact that it has had on recidivism. So students who are kids who would continuously have offenses, they would bring them in and have restorative practices. Those restorative practices get folks together and talk about, you know, what is the harm that's been done? How can we restore some of that harm? We've taken some of those practices and rolled out within our campuses as well. And so many APs, there was some multitude of trainings that happened with APs last year, and many APs have already communicated this year that they've been using the restorative circles to bring a teacher and student together to talk about that relationship. The restorative practices are all based on rebuilding relationships. So I know that that is something that we have gotten from our SROs and has been critical in some of our reteaching on campus.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Shannon, you as well, and for everyone joining us. As always, this will be available on our YouTube channel if you joined late and you missed a bit of the beginning, and otherwise we will see you next month. So thank you very
so
much.
Thank you for all your engagement, just your feedback and all the great questions and ideas. I got a lot of wonderful things that I'm going to take back to our teams to build up. So thank you all so very much.
Great. Thank you for all your work. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.